Hi, Christa. I am so looking forward to our conversation. We have had so many great chats over the years, and there's so many great stories that I reckon are likely to find their way out, and so many that we won't have time for, but I'm looking forward to this chat. We've known each other for a long time. Lots of people will not have met you. That's just the law of averages, is you've not met most people. So can you start us off with how would you describe yourself? What words or phrases or things would you think are helpful for people to understand what you're like?
Yeah, I think I am what I would say is a mixed bag, which people who know me would laugh, because almost any time anybody asks me how am I say I'm a mixed bag. But I think as a person I'm also a mixed bag, because I love, for example, I love nature, I love being out in nature. I'm fortunate enough to live in Glasgow, which has great access to the west coast of Scotland, Loch Lomond, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, access to it. I was just going to say Glasgow is not...
We have got more parks in Glasgow than many other places. I forget the exact fact, but many other places.
I thought you were going to nail some amazing fact.
Yeah,
You've got more parks than some other places that have less parks than Glasgow. Yeah. Anyway.
A lot of parks, but we've got access to Loch Lomond, less than an hour away. Got a kayak, love to go up there, do a bit of wild swimming, all that kind of stuff. But also I love the city. I love the hustle and bustle. I love the... lots of different cultures that are there, the fact that there's always new people coming in, there's always new opportunities and stuff kicking off. So that's a bit of a mixed bag. I love noise, I love people, I love all that kind of stuff, but also I find myself being drawn increasingly to silence, to contemplation, to stillness. And so I'm a mixed bag like that. I love adventure, but I'm not able to do as much of that as I like. So I'm a mixed bag in lots of ways. The one thing I'm not a mixed bag in is games. I almost always love a game, and I will almost always say yes, unless you ask me to play Monopoly, because controversially, I think it's trash. So...
Is it because you don't like capitalism?
Partly, but it's just that the only way you win is by making other people lose, and then everyone's confused why everyone gets angry. You're like, that's the
so
only
many family
way.
rows.
Yeah.
Now, what is your... I know you say you love all games. Apart from that, what's one of your favourite games that you would play? What's at the top of the list at the moment?
At the moment, I would say Azul Summer Pavilion, not Azul Basic Set, which is also good.
I don't know what you just said. Say that again.
Azul. Yeah, Azul. Azul Summer Pavilion. It's a tile-based game. It's fun and it's different every time you play it. So.
Sounds great. You also like making your own games up? I
do, yeah. Love me a games medley. Yeah, always fun. We introduced one leg or two leg this Christmas in my family.
How does that work?
Hide behind the counter, stand there, do one leg, two legs like that, and then stop. And then everybody has to guess, are you standing on one leg or two legs? I steal it from Taskmaster, I'm not going to lie, but it went down well. Yeah.
And this is like parlour game kind of vibes for growing up in a big family.
Yes, big family.
So played lots of, and big family gatherings have been a big part of your life.
Yes, we had 50 for Christmas lunch one time. That was a particularly large Christmas. But yeah, we used to hire boarding school for Christmas because my family was too big to go to somebody's house. So it was great. All the facilities, sports centre, trampolines.
What was that like growing up with that kind of...
Yeah, I loved it. I'm the youngest of 16 cousins on one side and 12, I think, on the other side. And not the second youngest, sorry. I have one cousin who's 3 months younger than me.
Okay.
But we were the youngest too. And I think we were all... Yeah, I loved it that my family were missionaries, all my cousins' families were missionaries and so on. So there was a real sense of camaraderie, I guess, and kind of being in it together. We just had a lot of fun. It's great.
So did you grow up as a Christian then? Or was there a moment for you of rebellion or of choosing Jesus? Or what was it like for you growing up as in what sounds like a Christian family? It might not have been.
Very much growing up in a Christian family. And always, I can't ever remember any concept of there not being a God or not having a relationship with God, or just never crossed my radar. I do remember when I was 7 years old making my own proclamation of faith, which was that I was committing to be a Christian my whole life, as opposed to go and then choose another religion. Those seemed to be the only options to me. Was not that you could not have a faith, but there could be different faiths, and I said I was going to follow Jesus.
You're picking Christianity.
Yep, when I was 7. So
never look back.
Yeah.
And I'm aware that you have lived in different places. Tell about some of the places you've lived in your life.
Yeah, so I was born in Bahrain, which nobody ever had heard of growing up until they got the Formula One. Now people know about Bahrain.
Now people know about Bahrain,
yeah, exactly. Lived there for a little bit, lived a couple of places in England, lived in Saudi Arabia, and then lived in Scotland, in Fife, and then across in Glasgow. But also when I was at uni, my parents moved to Sierra Leone and then Uganda, so I would spend my holidays there. So I spent some time there.
Was that for their jobs? Were they missionaries, or what was that?
Yeah, so they were missionaries, but also like you're not allowed to be a missionary in Saudi Arabia, for example. So they had, like, my dad was a doctor, and that was what he did. But I guess the reason that we were in those places was to tell people about Jesus.
Okay, and is that then? What was that like as a kid, growing up in those places with parents with sort of secret jobs? You know, like your secret mission was to share Jesus, but you're there with another job that everybody knows about.
Yeah, well, I do remember my sister sitting us down and going, guys, I think our parents are spies. I remember even 5 years younger than her being like, they're not spies, we're just missionaries in a country where that's illegal. So it was, quite hush-hush. I do remember my first memory of church is being told to be quiet in case the secret police found us.
Wow.
And we'd all have to, it was in somebody's house, because obviously we're not allowed to have a church.
So is this in Bahrain?
This is in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, okay.
And we'd arrive at different times and park on different streets and come in different ways. So that nobody found out we were there. And so I guess that was my early memories of faith, was that kind of thing. I remember...
Was it exciting? Was it scary? How did you find that?
Yeah, I think it wasn't scary. I think, I don't know, maybe I was too young to clock that, or I don't know, it didn't bother me. It was just, this was the way it was.
Yeah.
We used to smuggle Bibles in our car, and they used to like hide them under my seat because I was just like little and just chat to people. And yeah, didn't bother me. Just was our life, I guess. And yeah.
So you must then have seen people become Christians
Yeah.
in those places, and what was that like for them?
So yeah, I was young, and there was a church there of folks from Saudi. They didn't see a lot of people come to faith at the time. The interesting thing in more recent years is there's been a lot more people coming to faith in the Middle East. So yeah, I think I do remember recognizing it was much more risky for them than it was for us. And that, yeah, I guess in that way, it didn't seem like our lives were that... I don't know, we didn't have as much on the line as they did. And I guess I was aware of that. But yeah, it was hot and had a good time. Just good camping in the desert, and yeah, it was good.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you're an adventurer. You've got the spirit of adventure is strong with you. So do you think that's partly because of that? Is that just in your family DNA, in because of your childhood? What do you think that's about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think... where do these things come from? Family experiences. I think I've been blessed to have traveled a lot when I was young. Yeah, across the Middle East, across places in Africa, particularly, and then Europe and America and stuff. And yeah, I think just that experience. You get used to it, and so you think it's possible, and it's exciting to see new places, different cultures, different people. Yeah.
And what about the adventure side of God? What does that look like for you? How have you experienced the wildness of the Holy Spirit and pioneering and adventuring with faith? What's that like? Yeah,
I guess. I remember I wasn't till I was about 15 or 16 till I considered the concept of not being a missionary abroad, that was even a possibility, that you could do that, because I think the concept of just being a Christian, going to church on Sunday, living your normal life didn't make sense to me. And since then, I live in Scotland, and I've recognised there's lots of great ways of living for Jesus in this country. But I think it was really built into me, because my parents and my grandparents and so on were all missionaries. That like life with God was a life on adventure, and it was a life that might cost you something, but that could take you anywhere. I trained as a primary school teacher because I thought, well, anywhere in the world, they need a teacher. And so that's why I did that at university.
Wow, that's so interesting. So I mean, lots of people go to university for all sorts of reasons, and they don't end up doing those things. But that you don't hear that very often. So you picked a career and a degree because you thought, I can do this anywhere in the world, so God can take me anywhere he wants. Yeah,
exactly. Because who knows where you're going to end up, and so good to have something that's going to be useful anywhere in the world.
Wow, what an interesting thought. And so did you go to uni in Glasgow?
Yep. So I was at Strathclyde, which is a bit of a rival to Glasgow University. But
when you say a rival, do you personally think it's better than Glasgow, or is it a rivalry in a kind of, we say that, but we actually know it's not really as good?
It depends on what course you're doing. So for primary teaching, Strathclyde is better. And other courses, Glasgow's better. So depends what you're doing.
So you went to Strathclyde. What was university like for you? What was it? How did you experience university?
I think, going to uni, I think I really benefited from the fact that, so we also had moved around the UK quite a lot growing up. So I was very used to being in a new place with new people, and so that wasn't a shock to me. And so I remember turning up and being like, oh, everyone else is kind of freaking out here. I got this. Like, this is my jam, being new somewhere. So I think I felt pretty well set up for that. I also remember part of the reason I went to Glasgow actually is because there was a weekend away of student leaders who were involved with Fusion in Scotland at my house when I was a teenager before I went to uni. And one of them said, we want to start student small groups in Glasgow, come to Glasgow, get involved, it'll be great. And that's partly why I did that. And so within the first couple of weeks, I was in meetings about starting student small groups. My first Sunday on church, I was handing out the bulletin on the door somehow, and just got plugged in.
Was it your brother that was involved?
It was my brother and then my sister.
Well, involved in Fusion in your early days.
Yeah.
And you, as a young person before going to university, had been around that, and that was exciting to be around students who are passionate about Jesus, I guess. And
yeah. And actually, so my granny went to church with Roger Ellis. So from the very early days, we'd go and visit. And
Roger was the founder of Fusion. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I guess that was my perception. You go to uni, you get involved with student mission, and that was very much part of what my expectation was.
Okay, so you got plugged in. Were you helping to run things in your church at that stage, or?
Yeah, so I started running student small groups in first, maybe second year, but definitely was involved from the start of that. And that was cool. It was a great time, like one of those, rammed into a small room till the early hours, and people exploring faith, people coming to faith, people owning it for themselves. And I think that was really pivotal.
What helped that? Who were the other characters that are around you? What helped that situation to?
I guess, there was 3 other female student leaders actually who had got involved with Fusion and were kind of supported and stuff by some people, and they had a real heart for it, and I guess our church had a lot of students but had never done anything specifically for students, so this was a fresh expression of what does it look like to really focus on the student generation and what's going on with them. And yeah,
what were the
with
kind
some
of
cool
questions
people.
that students were asking then? And can you give us a rough time frame for when that was?
Yeah, that was, I'm older than I look commonly. That was 2004, I went to uni.
Yeah.
What were the kind of questions students were asking? That's a good question. Do you know, this is the thing that I think is probably one of the significant shifts. A lot of them were not asking any questions. I think that's the thing, is that, as I say, some of them were, and some of them we saw come to faith and all that kind of stuff. But I think in comparison to now, I think a lot of people were just rolling with the status quo, do you know?
Yeah.
And grown up however they'd grown up. And if that was in a faith-based background, maybe they continued that, maybe they didn't. If they grew up in an atheist background, that was just that. And, you know, life was just as it was, and there wasn't a huge amount of questioning about faith and God and stuff like that.
So
But
just society was a lot more comfortable mid-2000s, before the 2008 crash.
yeah,
Lots of jobs on offer. But now with everything that's happened since then, people are like, what is life about?
yes, yeah,
Can't rely on what we used to think was reliable.
yeah, absolutely.
So I'm putting my words into your mouth, but I'm thinking you're saying, as a comparison, then students now are thinking much more.
Yeah, I think before there was a lot of, stability, a lot more trust in the job market, in financial security, in whatever. And I think now, particularly post-COVID, that has just been totally dashed. And I was reflecting on this a bit, and I think it's both a good thing and not a good thing. I think there's opportunity and there's challenge. I think obviously everybody's talking about the student mental health crisis, and I think part of that is because of this complete lack of stability in the world and this feeling like I can't trust in anybody or anything. And that is deeply unsettling. However, I do think it's also revealed to people much younger that yes, those things are not stable. And actually, that's a good thing. I was speaking to a financial...
People had their trust in the wrong thing.
They had their trust in the wrong things. I was speaking to a financial advisor the other day, and I said, why did you go into the money business? And he said, I was looking for security, and money was security. And so I thought, if I get a good job in money, make money, and then I'll be secure. And he said, I did that for a bit, and then I realized, there wasn't secure. That actually wasn't going to bring me security. So I had a bit of this like crisis, and ultimately I realized the only thing that I could find my security in was God. That's the only thing that's stable. And so I think there's an opportunity here that's been highlighted from a much younger age. These other things are not what you're going to find security in. I think there's a chance for people to discover their security in God at a much younger age. And I think that if they do that, is going to have significant ramifications for them and for society and the communities they live in.
So you were saying you were at, as a student at that church, and then did you go into teaching for a while?
So I did my probation year, which is what they call it in Scotland, which people in England generally think is like a prison thing. Some might say it feels like that, but
Depends on the school, probably.
Depends on the school. I really enjoyed my year, so I did that after uni, and then after that, I was like, right, I've done my degree, I've done my probation year, I've kind of done all the things you're supposed to do, and what I want to do is see what God wants me to do with my life and actually take some time. So I did a bit of a kind of year out post-uni as opposed to pre-uni, did a year with the church, and basically at the start of the year said, right, God, I've done all that stuff that I need to do, and so I can say with all honesty, whatever you want me to do with my life, I can do that because now I have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And off the back of that, I felt called into the ministry in some form or another. And so I carried on tutoring along the side, but off the back of that, I ended up being a student worker in the church. And then that has led to what I'm doing now.
What are you doing now?
Yes, great question. I head up Fusion Scotland.
That sounds like a great organisation to work for.
Well, it is pretty great.
So how did that come about though? What led you into that? What's drawn you into that whole thing of Fusion in Scotland?
So I had been working as a student worker for 7-8 years and had been involved with Fusion and in terms of was supported by Fusion. So I used to come down 3 times a year for training, was on the phone to people used to come up, all that kind of stuff. And so I guess on the one hand, recognise the value in that and how significant that support was to me in my role and what a difference that was making. And so I was doing that and that was all good. And then I started to sense a niggle for some change. And initially I thought it was probably around stuff within the church or this or that. And then also I knew that you guys were thinking about Scotland and the need to do something in Scotland which was more representative of the Scottish people, the Scottish church, that would serve them better. But at the time my mobility was really, really bad. And I was like, that sounds great, but I can't travel. I just can't do something like that. And then, long story short, experienced some significant healing.
Could you just press pause on and just explain that a little bit more? So you said your mobility was bad.
Yeah.
What did that look like?
So when I was 22 and doing my probation year, towards the end of that, so I used to be a gymnast, display gymnast, which was more like the circus than what you see on TV. And so that's what we used to do. And anyway, was doing a display and ruptured the ligaments in my ankle pretty badly. And that was, wasn't great. Got better to a degree, and then over time, then it plateaued, and then just got worse and worse over, about 7-8 years. So that was the time that I was student working so I was on crutches for about 4 years, and after I had a kayaking incident went awry. When I will say, don't go kayaking around Lindisfarne, because it has the largest tidal pool anywhere, I think, in the UK. And
Sorry, you went kayaking while on crutches though?
No, well, yeah, because you don't need your legs for kayaking.
Okay,
That's why I got into it, because I was like, I love sports, and there was nothing I could do that I couldn't walk more than 5 minutes. I couldn't do anything else, and so I was like, I got to get a kayak. So that's how I got into.
So you got wild water kayaking, sea kayaking.
Sea kayak, it's mostly sea and loch kayaking.
And you went near Lindisfarne.
Yeah.
Holy Island, all around there.
Yeah, exactly. Kayaking along. It was like the most beautiful day. Sun was shining. We were out for like 4 or 5 hours. So after this, we were much better prepared. But this was near the start of me and my mate, who I was with, kayaking adventures. We got to Lindisfarne, we'd run out of all our water, we'd run out of all our food, apart from we had 1 nectarine left. And so I sent my friend to go and get some water from the monastery, because I was like, well, they've got to give us water.
Sikh sanctuary.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Turns out Holy Isle is much bigger than you would expect. And she was gone for 45 minutes, running over the sand dunes, didn't see a soul. So she came back, even more tired, no water, still really hot. Yeah. So we were like, right, well, that's that. We've just got to get back.
Did you have the nectarine at that point?
No, we didn't have the nectarine at that point. We saved it, yeah. Wow. And
I would have eaten it.
No.
In fact, I would have eaten it when she was gone, hoping that she was going to come back with more. Okay, so
we saved it, and so the bay's like this, and we had kayaked around the bay like this. But on the way back, we were like, well, we're tired. We've only got 1 nectarine between us. Let's cut across the bay. And this was as the tide was going out.
This was a bad move.
It was. It was a really bad move. But we like kayaking. It's looking good. And then suddenly, I look to shore, and I'm like, oh, we're really far from shore.
When you're going underneath an oil rig, you realise we may have gone off course a little bit.
Well, and what was worse, both our phones were dead. Nobody in the world knew where we were. And the only map we had was an AA map from the car. We didn't have like a proper OS map or anything. We'd brought the AA map, so that is not great. And so
Pretty good on roads and junctions.
Not great for kayaking.
Not great on when you're offshore.
No, yeah.
Okay.
So we're suddenly really far out, and I look in, and I'm like, oh, okay. But my friend who I was with, I was like, I don't know how. My upper body strength was great, because when you're on crutches, you get stacked in the upper body, because like that's what's doing all the work. And I was like, she's fit, but has she got good upper body strength? I don't know. So I'm like trying not to get her to freak out. And I'm like, oh, I think let's actually just head in to shore. I think that might be better. And afterwards, it turns out both of us at this moment thought, we might die today.
Yeah.
But neither of us said this. We were just like, oh yeah, good moves, good idea.
Yeah.
So we turn into shore and we're like paddling as hard as you can and making like so little progress. And you couldn't take a break, because if you took a break, you were just gone. And so I'm like,
sounds horrendous.
yeah, so I'm like, do I stay beside her for like moral support, or do I go ahead for the like competition, like I'm gonna catch up thing? So I went a little bit ahead, and anyway, we kayaked so hard to get a not that far distance. Anyway, eventually we made it to shore, and that's when we ate our nectarine.
I bet it felt great at that point.
It did feel amazing. And we had a nectarine, but the problem was we were trying to get to the other side of the bay, but we'd been pulled in. And so we decided it was better to walk to where we had come from rather than kayak back in the sea. Unfortunately,
you wouldn't have wanted to go in the sea again.
No.
At that point.
No. So we had bungee cords with us, which we'd just chucked in. This was our best move. The ones with the hooks on the end.
Yeah.
So we hooked them onto the handles on the front of our kayaks, and we walked through the shallows to pull the kayaks back. But yeah, at this point, the doctors were saying to me, you shouldn't walk for more than 5 minutes at a time, because if I was doing that, my pain was getting significantly higher.
Yeah.
And so, but we had a long way to go. And there was no access road, nothing. And so we were like, right. So we set our timers, and we would walk for 5 minutes, and then I would sit down for 3 minutes, and then we'd walk for 5 minutes, and then I'd sit down for 3 minutes, and so on and so on, so on, for about 2 hours.
Oh.
And it was like both horrendous, and there was just this beautiful sunset, and and so it was this weird juxtaposition, and we couldn't remember exactly where our car was. It was behind a sand dune, and we had taken photos of it, but our phones were dead. So my friend had to run up and down quite a few sand dunes to find out which one was the one.
Oh my word.
But eventually we got there, and we knew in the car we had a can of Lil and a Mars bar, and we were like, if we can make it, then that's what we've got. But once we got there, we had to carry the kayaks across the beach, over the sand dunes, to the car, put the kayaks on the roof, and drive back. So that's what we did.
I bet that did you say Mars bar?
A Mars bar,
I bet
yeah.
that tasted great.
Yeah, to this day, I now always have a Mars
All
bar
the
in the
chocolate
car.
bars are available,
Yeah,
but you've gone with that one.
Yeah, I
because of
don't
the
even really
memories.
like Mars bars, but that's like pure energy.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is all to say you
A tangent.
you had an injury, and we're in long-term
Yeah.
pain, so on crutches, and then there was healing.
Yeah, so well, after the kayaking incident, much worse, because that was not a great time. So then I had to have 24-hour support for about 4 months.
Because of the kayak.
Because of the kayak, because basically I ended up just limping so badly that I got all kinds of secondary issues with my hips and my ankle and all that kind of stuff. And so life was looking fairly grim at this point. And I remember, and I had a good friend who I was kayaking with, she was doing a lot of looking after me and helping out. And then one day she fell off a bike and broke her arm. And I was just like, God, she's got broken arm. I can't do basically anything. This is not a good situation. Something's got to change. Like, this is not tenable. And the next day I had booked in a prophecy appointment at church, which is a thing that our church did. And I went up there on my crutches, and the people started talking about me doing something like what I was doing in terms of student work, but much further afield, and in a wider context. And I remember thinking, well, that would be great, but I literally couldn't make my breakfast this morning. And so
Hard to imagine.
Yeah, and that was that. Anyway, and then they said, "Oh, we'd love to pray for your ankle," and they did. And hundreds of people prayed for me. But that day, yeah, I could feel something like inside my ankle. Felt like there was a hand in my body.
Wow.
And I was like, this feels different. Something is going on here. And anyway, they said, "Oh, what can you not usually do?" Class. I said, "Well, stand up for any amount of time."
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, see how you go." Church had just started. And I remember standing all the way through the worship set and being like, wow, this is all right. Like, this feels okay. And essentially, yeah, went into church on crutches, walked out not on crutches. And yeah, I would say it wasn't complete healing. It was about 85%, I would say. And then I gained probably 15% after that. I probably left with 5% issues with that ankle, but not much.
Wow.
So yeah, that
How
was
encouraging.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So this was about your calling into Fusion. What led you into...
Yeah. So then I was like, well, first of all, I was like, is this real? Can this be trusted? It kind of like, yeah, the doctors would said, you will never get better. This is your life, da, da, da. And so I was like, right, well, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for what I can do, etc.? So that was all around the same time, and the same time I had the sense of change, the same time that I know you guys were thinking about stuff in Scotland. And so I started thinking about it, started praying about it, went up on a hill one day and was praying with the same friend that I was kayaking with. And I remember I just had this phrase, "The future's bright, the future's orange." And obviously it was from, well, orange, I guess.
Fusion's incredibly orange.
And Fusion's incredibly orange. And there was more to it than that, but I just felt like...
That's also quite reassuring.
Yeah. I thought, do you know what? I think this is what God is calling me into. And so discussions ensued and so on. And met with lots of church leaders. And and Fusion Scotland was born.
So good. What have been some of your... stories that you've really enjoyed about Fusion Scotland since doing that? What's been encouraging? What have you seen in the student scene in Scotland?
There's a number of things that have been cool, that have been encouraging. I think seeing the breadth of student work in terms of lots of different types of churches, lots of different types of denominations, lots of different types of student workers and all that kind of stuff. And, I think it's easy to think, oh, there's the big student church in the city, or there's this type of church students want to go to. But I think we need all of the church to play its part. And so it's been really cool seeing lots of different, types of people doing student missions, doing student discipleship in different ways, and therefore reaching different types of students. So that's been cool. And then just it's a privilege to hear the stories of people coming to faith, people's lives being turned around in different places, and being able to be a part of that, to whatever degree, and support the student workers to interact with students, whatever it is that is our part to play in that, that story. It's been cool.
Christa, what have been some of the great God stories that you've enjoyed? The sort of faith-building stories that you've been inspired by or been part of?
Yeah, so as I said, I grew up in a missionary family, and if you've spent any time around missionaries, you'll know they love a good story. And particularly around the campfire, all the better. And so I was raised on the stories of missionaries that had gone before us and other people that we knew. And I think that there are lots of different things I love about those stories. And I think what really I have taken from some of that stuff is stories of, this mixture of stories of people who went somewhere and they, they put their heart and soul into sharing the gospel, doing whatever it is they were doing. And some of those people actually didn't see very much, if anything, for a really long time, if even in their lifetime. You know, I think my great grandfather went off to China, and they saw some stuff, but not a lot of stuff, in comparison to the growth in the church that we've seen, you know, in recent years.
Just tell us a little bit more about your grandfather, because I've heard a bit about that before. People will have heard about your grandfather, but won't know about.
True. So that was my great grandfather was one of the Cambridge Seven, who are quite well known, who went from Cambridge, hence the name, and a group of young men.
If people have not heard of the Cambridge Seven, Google the Cambridge Seven and read about those stories.
Yeah, and yeah, it was a group of men who were captured by this call to live their lives for Jesus, to tell others about him, and that they would give up. A lot of them, most of them had successful careers and whatever looking ahead of them, and to sacrifice
these
those
are students,
things.
Right?
They were, students and just recent grads who went to Cambridge, which obviously is a big deal in these days, but in those days was like a big deal.
A huge deal, yeah.
Often from, quite wealthy families and all that kind of stuff. And to give up that, and to go somewhere where they had never been, they'd probably never heard of. My great-great-grandfather on the other side, he also went to West Africa, and I was just looking in one of the books actually the other day, and it was saying that the expected life expectancy of missionaries was 2 years. 80% of them died.
You brought all your possessions in a coffin.
Yes, loads of them did that, and yet they chose to do that. And I think, and so there's stories of people who did that, and they saw mixed things in their lifetime, and yet generations later we see a huge harvest. And then there's stories of other people. So my great-grandfather on the other side, they were involved with the East African revival, and they saw thousands and thousands and thousands of people come to faith. And I've been to those churches where those things happened, and met some of the people who their parents or whatever were involved, and old people who can remember kind of that stuff kicking off. And I love both of those types of stories. And I think the thing is, it's about doing what you feel God is calling you to, and to sticking at that, and maybe you'll see massive results in your lifetime or in the short term, and maybe you won't. But actually, the key thing is about being obedient to the call of God in your life. So I think those stood out to me.
And in terms of legacy, that is like front and center in your life, isn't it? So in a way, you're living the legacy of your great grandparents. How many greats have we got in the mix?
Yeah, 2 double greats,
and they have lived lives of mission, lives for God, that has had a legacy in the place where they've gone. But also in your family, by the sounds of it, there's been a lot of missionaries since, which is part of that. Legacy.
Yeah. Every generation since that from me has been involved in mission on both sides of the family.
Is that 5?
So I'd be the 5th generation.
Okay.
And I think that's the thing. I was in a meeting the other day with some people talking about doing some stuff around calling people to step up and commit to giving their lives to the gospel. And what really struck me in that meeting was, it's not just that one person's yes, and the impact that one person is going to have in their life, but the stuff that, who is it that's going to listen to that call, and that their great-great-great-grandchild, what are they going to be doing, and what are the generations that are going to be impacted?
Yeah.
And, if you think about that, the impact of one person saying their yes can be absolutely vast.
And the cost, I guess, of those, the early ones, the 5 generations back, deciding to break with the tradition of their family being wealthy and having lots of good prospects and so on, but to sacrifice that's a huge juncture in a family tree history, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you think that when people, or let's think about students now deciding about calling, is it more about deciding whether they might work for a charity or a church? Is it less about sacrificing everything, or what do you think about that?
I think it vastly depends on who it is and what they are being called to. And I think also it's easy to look. I mean, I think say the sacrifices that were made were vast and easy to see, but I think the sacrifices people are being called to today are sometimes as vast and sometimes as significant and obvious. But there's other things I think can be just as challenging, that might not involve moving to the other side of the world, but might involve, their careers or something in their families, or it could be location or whatever. But I do think, I think sacrifice is just involved in anything worthwhile, really, isn't it? And I think that is, I think that's an important thing to let people know.
There's a cost, there's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Well, on that then, if I bring you back to you and your life, as opposed to the grandparents and the great-great-grandparents, I'm aware that you're living in chronic pain. So could you tell us a bit about that story? Is that connected to the ankle? Where does that all piece together?
Yeah, so obviously I said about what happened before. Received, I would say, 80-ish% healing my ankle, was left with bits and bobs and also quite weak muscles from not being able to walk very far for a really long time. But basically stuff was getting better, like I was still in pain, but my mobility was improving and my pain was decreasing and so on. And then about 3 years after that, just before COVID hit actually, I just was sweeping the floor one day, put my back out, and was like, this is not something I've ever had an issue with before. And it was not, it was bad, but I thought, 6 weeks or whatever, it'll be fine. And it did get better, but about 6-8 months later, same thing happened again, and then again and again. So that's been 5 times now in the last 3 years, coming up for 4 years. And so that is currently my main physical challenge. But it means that, between the two of them, I've not had a day in nearly 15 years that I've not been in some form of pain.
Wow.
Yeah.
And can you share a bit about that? Like what's that like, not living in a place of full healing, and how have you processed that?
Yeah, it is not something I ever expected. I mean, who does? And I think it is something which I have. I mean, it's been like this and all that. I've been around the houses with it. It's been 15 years, like I say. It's not something I would have chosen. It's definitely something that I have learned a lot through. I think, processing it again, it's been all kinds of things. I think for me, it's been a mixture of nearer the start, or when the doctors were like, this is your life, and all that kind of stuff. I did a bit of a deep dive into, trying to figure out where did my life sit in the story of the Bible, of the people of faith throughout history. And so I started looking at all the characters in the Bible, and then also people more recently who had suffered in various ways. And to me, part of what was helpful was recognizing my life is not that unusual in terms of suffering in some way is very common, and not necessarily in the same way that I had done. So I think that was part of it. I think also recognizing this I think a lot of us, particularly in the West, feel like we are owed good health and comfort and so on and so on. And so when we don't have that, we feel like we're robbed. And I definitely felt like I was robbed for a while. But I think thinking about it and doing a lot of processing, I think it's actually a gift to have a healthy body and all that kind of stuff. And so I've not been robbed. And I think that mindset shift was helpful for me. Not that it's not difficult, not that I don't wish that I could do all the things I want to do, and hopefully one day we'll be able to do, I mean, who knows, but I think that just that perspective was really helpful. And then I think beyond that, I think consistently throughout it, I have just tried to see what I feel like God is saying to me, and to lean into that. And that has been a number of different things, you know, and different focuses at different times, but I think that has been the important thing, and recognizing that yes, my physical body is significant, and yes, I grieve what I can't do a lot of the time, but it's also not everything, and there are things that I'm learning that I couldn't learn any other way.
Yeah, so there's been a gift wrapped up in it, although you wouldn't have chosen the route.
Yeah.
But God's been with you in it, and you've learned through it, and yeah, thanks. Let's change tack a little bit. What advice would you give to your student self?
I think I would keep it simple. I think I would say spend a little less time talking to God and a little more time listening to God. I think, you know, I did used to listen to God, but I think as time goes on, I'm increasingly convinced that he says the things we need to hear. And
Worth listening to.
it's worth listening to. I think maybe when I was a student, I mostly thought about listening to God for other people or for directional things, you know, what should I do or whatever, which is fine. But I think increasingly I would listen to God, and he would say to me things that I need to hear for me, for what I need to get me through the day, to get me through whatever the things that are important about who I am and all that kind of stuff. And I think he knows what we need to hear.
What are the scriptures that have sustained you throughout the years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, embarrassed is the wrong word, but it's such a cliche. But the verse in 2 Corinthians where, you know, Paul is chatting to God about his thorn in the flesh, and God says to him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And I think that has been, that's been huge for me. I've been forced to be a lot weaker than I would have liked to have been, but to recognise the value of that, actually, and on relying on God and trusting in him for the things that I can't do.
And how about some of the individuals that have been helpful in your long-term journey? Some of the people who've kept you going, and it could be, I guess, authors as well, if you've read or listened to certain people.
Yeah, I think there's been lots of different people at different times. Like for all of us. So, you know, I've had a lot of good friends, particularly through church, that walked with me, that I think sometimes, particularly when life is a bit hard, and you feel like, oh, you know, I've not got the faith for this, or, you know, whatever, people who can give you that outside perspective and say, this is what I see in you, and this is what I see, this is how I see you pursuing God and all that kind of stuff, and this is what I see God doing through you. I think has been really helpful. I think my family's really grounding, and have been really consistently there for me. And yeah, I'm the youngest of four, and the other ones, seeing them even just go through uni, go through life a bit before me, and watching them live their lives and the books they've told me to read and the conferences they've taken me to and all that kind of stuff. And then I think as well, I think my counsellor, so that's another thing I think I've had to process, obviously, with my health. And I started seeing a Christian counsellor about 5 years ago, and I still see her now. And the way that she has helped me to journey through a lot of questions and a lot of wrestling and all the emotional stuff that's come along with it has been really significant to me. So yeah, and then in terms of books, lots of different people. I would say Dallas Willard was a really key. I read The Divine Conspiracy just out of uni, and I think his way of describing what it means to be a disciple, what it means to follow Jesus, and that whole internal change resulting in the outside stuff, as opposed to trying to control the outside stuff, had a significant impact on me as I was kind of starting out in ministry and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What would, so two questions put together. What do you think this current generation of students is like, and what do you think God wants to say? What do you think the Holy Spirit's saying to those students right now?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, a bit like we mentioned before, they are a generation who know that you cannot put your trust in the things that previous generations have. I think there's a blessing in that as well as the challenge. I think they are a generation who increasingly and now I think widely believe that there is something out there more than we can see and touch, and they are looking for, I think, peace and I think abundant life, and they believe that if they can tap into that thing, then that is going to make a difference in their life. And I think they're looking to that in all kinds of different ways, but I think they are aware and they're looking. I think they're aware that they often need help, that there are things in them that are broken and they're looking for wholeness. And I think with all of those things, there's a real opportunity for them to encounter Jesus and to live lives based on him. So I think those are some things that I would see in this generation. My sense that I think God would say to them, when I very first started Fusion Scotland, I felt God say to me, I want you to tell the students of Scotland that I am not disappointed in them.
Wow.
And that's a thing that I've tried to do consistently.
Why do you think that was what you sensed the Holy Spirit saying? Do you think people do feel God is disappointed?
I think they did. It kind of came a bit left field for me, and I was like, oh, that's a little bit weird, or it wasn't what I was expecting. And so I started to ask, well, yeah, why do people need to hear that? I think that yes, people do think that God is disappointed in them. I think
judged.
Yeah, and like they're not good enough. They don't live up to his standards. That they're not. If they're not from a Christian background, that he's disappointed in whatever's gone on in their life. If they are from a Christian background, that they're not good enough Christians, or whatever.
It's like a great lie that's been spoken over a generation. Yeah.
I think so, and so that it's been interesting actually in a few different circles just saying that to students. God is not disappointed in you. Kind of watching that kind of thing, happen with people.
You can see it, can you?
Yeah. You can see it on people in their body language, I think. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing this year, particularly I was praying with my colleague about, we were looking at the year ahead, and before we wanted to make any plans, we said, well, what is Jesus doing? What does he want to do in Scotland?
Yeah.
Let's find out about that. Then we'll see what's our part to play in that. And the sense that I had really strongly was that Jesus was saying, I want to offer the students of Scotland peace.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. I think Jesus is holding out peace and is offering that to people.
Wow, that's brilliant. Christa, I know how much you love Scotland, and you've lived all over the place. So in terms of accent,
Nightmare.
You've had some different accents in your time.
Yes.
And I also know from you that when you're around people with different accents, you are affected by that.
Yeah. Even if I'm thinking about people with different accents.
Then you start to sound
Yes.
like those people.
Yes.
In today's culture, it can be more or less acceptable to find yourself doing those accents.
Oh, yeah.
Have you found yourself in any awkward places?
Yeah.
Doing an accent that's not great to be doing?
Well, I haven't found myself in terms of like accents that would be deemed inappropriate. It's
Okay.
more that what commonly happens is I will meet with somebody and then I have their accent because I'm speaking to them, and then they think I'm from where they're from.
Right. So you're in Scotland. You're meeting with a church pastor who happens to be American.
Well, so I was at 61 with Fusion last summer. I met with Christy Wimber. We sat down. 10 minutes in, she goes, "Oh, and I hear you're from this. I can tell you're from the States." And I was like, "Oh, well, you see, I'm not, but you are." And then that doesn't go great. So yeah, the worst. Well, if I can tell a bit of a story about it. I was at a wedding. Well, I was going to a wedding. My friend who I ran a student group actually with, she said, "Can you do a reading?" I said, "Fine, no problem, easy, just do a reading." But as it got closer and closer to it, the more I realised this could be problematic, because I was in Sierra Leone, obviously with a lot of Sierra Leoneans, with my parents who have English/East African accents, with a lot of Dutch people.
Do they not sound Scottish?
No, because they're not grown up there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, then a lot of Dutch people who were on the team, and Americans who were on the team, right? So this is where I've been for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I fly back into Scotland. I've got 2 days till the wedding. Fine. I go to the wedding. I'm staying in an Airbnb or whatever with my mate from Northern Ireland, which is like one of my key strongest, just fall into that.
Go to that, yeah.
Yeah, and
I think you've done it a little bit during this interview.
Well, yeah. Loads of my friends in church thought I was from Northern Ireland because they were from Northern Ireland.
Okay.
And it was a problem. And then my other friend from Manchester, which again, and the wedding was in England. And so I was like, this is a nightmare. And so, but then I decided, do you know what? It doesn't matter what accent I have, as long as it's the same accent throughout the reading. So I was like, my plan is just listen to yourself for the first sentence and then go with that. Go, whatever the accent is, just go with it. So the passage was supposed to say, "My dear friends, I tell you this, love one another as life. Christ loved the church," on and on. So I get up and I'm like, right, listen to that. I read and I go, "My dear friends, I tell you this, do not love one another."
Because you're worrying about the accent.
Yeah, exactly.
You encourage people to not love them.
In a wedding. So everybody obviously falls apart, right, in the church. And then I'm like, oh, I've just got to start again. So I just own it. And I'm like, right, well, let's go again. And just don't look at any of my friends. And I'm like, right. So anyway, so that was bad to start with. But then it got worse, right? So I did the reading, fine. Later on, I'm in like the toilets waiting for a toilet. And this girl's standing next to me. And she turns around and she goes, "Just wondering where you're from." And I was like, oh. And so I answered that question very differently depending on who's asking. And so I stood there for a minute trying to figure out, why is she asking? And eventually I just turned to her and went, "Do you think you know me?" Which is like...
So aggressive.
So aggressive and so up myself. Not even do you think you know me? And she just went, "No, you're just the girl who did the reading, right?"
You're the one who encouraged us to not love one another.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh yeah," she was like, "We were taking bets from where you were from because of your accent." So I just thought I'd ask. And I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That's so like rude of me." I said, "It's just, I've lived in different places. I answered that differently." And I said, "Well, out of interest, where did you decide I was from?" And she went, "Wales." It was the only one that wasn't in there at all. So yeah, it is a bit of a problem. But there we go.
Okay, so part of loving Scotland and living there now is you went on a holiday where you went round. Is it the 500? Is that what it's called?
North Coast 500.
The North Coast 500 miles around. Did you sing that song all the time?
What song?
A song to do with 500 miles.
Oh, I know. Well, mine 5. Oh, we didn't actually sing it that much.
I don't know how you did the Scottish 500 and that didn't be the soundtrack for you. Anyway, so while you were doing that, you were camping and then doing some wild swimming.
Yes, every day.
Just tell us about what happened when you went in wild swimming. You wild swum every day?
Yes.
And on one particular occasion, in a river?
In a river, yeah. So we were on our way back down Went through Dunkeld, excellent place if you ever want a nice river walk. And most of the days, or quite a lot of the days, it'd been quite cold, wearing our wetsuits and stuff, but this was like proper warm, and it was like a river, quite a shallowish river, so the water was quite warm. So we were like, fine, we'll just go and swimwear. And we're going in, fine. And I was going at the front and just swimming, and then I suddenly feel this like stabbing in my arm, and I thought, oh, it must be like a wee thistle or something that's caught in the river. And so I looked down, and there's like, this looks like a bug or something. And I was like, have I been like stung underwater by a thing? What's going on? Anyway, I like kind of stand up or whatever and look. And turns out, and I actually can see the scar now, I've been caught by a fish hook with a fly, fake fly on it that is attached still to the fishing wire that's attached to a stick that's got tangled up, and that's why it's in the river. So I was like,
you got fish hooked?
I got fish hooked in my arm.
There wasn't a fisherman at the end of
No fisherman. It was just in the river, which does happen, but you should definitely still wild swim, but it can happen, and some places fishermen are not good. If they clearly she'd done her thing, and then it got tangled up and cut the line, and so it was in.
They literally cut their losses, but then it added to your losses.
It did add to my losses.
What do you do if you get fish hooked?
Well, exactly. So first of all, I was like, I'm now attached to the branch on the side of the river, so that's not great.
That's not ideal.
So broke the branch, and then I'm holding the branch wire fish hook. And then I'm with a couple of friends, one of whom, same as the kayaking incident, she's quite squeamish. She was like, I can't look. Right? And I'm like, right, well,
You've been some adventures with this person.
Yeah, loads of adventures. And then my other friend, she wasn't much help either. I can't remember. Yeah, maybe she'd even got... Anyway, so we were like, right, what to do? And
you might as well have been on your own, let's be honest.
Well, so no, we called my friend's boyfriend at the time, and he does some fishing, and he was like, well, you've got to like push it back through. Continue on, right? But I said, well, I can't because there's a fly thing on it, so that's not going to go through. And he was like, fair play. So we thought, well, off to A&E, that's just what we've got to do. I'm in like a kind of bikini tankini thing, holding the stick, got like a little towel around my shoulders, put on some shorts, I guess. Anyway, walk back down to the car, 20 minutes walking down, everyone's like, all right. Got a fish hook in my arm.
Is it bleeding quite a bit?
No, not really bleeding at all, actually, just in. I guess it hadn't come out at that point.
At this stage, it's just jagged in.
It's just well, it's a hook like that, so it's gone like that in, but not out.
Right.
So at the moment, there's only one puncture hole.
Okay.
So anyway, then we checked where's the local place. Perth, turns out, had a minor injuries thing or whatever. So we turn up.
Global expert on fish hook.
Yeah, well, the hilarious thing was everybody we spoke to went, oh, were you fishing? No, look at this branch. You think I was fishing with that? But most people apparently get fish hooked themselves when they are fishing.
Okay.
So I was like, no, I was swimming. They're like, oh, right, okay. Anyway, then the man eventually got seen by the person who was going to do it. And he went, well, I could give you an anaesthetic because he was like, I'm going to have to whoosh it out, cut the fly off. He was like, but that'll be a jab, and it'll also be a jab to get it out. So, up to you. So I thought, fair play. I said, just go for it. That'll be fine.
No anaesthetic.
No.
Poor decision.
It was a poor decision because he had to manhandle the hook to make a new hole, right, to come out of.
Yeah.
And then it's got a barb on it, which is why it can't come back in the first place.
Yeah.
So then that had to come through as well. And then the bit he snipped at the end, which is also a bit jabby. So really it was more like...
A bit jabby?
Yeah. And so that went all through. That was fine. Anyway, then I heard him like speaking to his advisor, and he's like, post, not op, whatever, care. And the advisor goes, oh, can I look at the fish hook? And he goes, oh no, I've already chucked it away. He was like, well, was it rusty? He was like, no, I don't think it was rusty. And he was like, well, tell her to go off, and if she gets track lines up her arm, then come back. I was like, right, okay. So that was that. Didn't have any track lines. All's well that ends well.
Adventure has been throughout your life. That's always been a theme, and some slight mishaps along the way. If your life so far was to be a prayer, if if you're your legacy that you're going to leave behind, what would that be? So if your life was a prayer, what would the answer to that prayer be? What's going to be the legacy that you hope will be the fruit of your life and ministry?
I think a couple of things spring to mind. I think one, the reason I head up Fusion Scotland and do the work we do with the churches and with the students across the country is I want to see Scotland transformed by Jesus. And students are a great, it's a pivotal time of their lives. And so working with them makes sense. And so I guess the answer to the prayer of what I do and why I do it would be that in 50, 100 years, those generation after generation of students will have come through university, will have met with Jesus, will have been transformed by him, and that will have a significant impact on their workplace, their family, their community. And that as that spreads out, that will change a nation. And more than that, actually, many other nations, as people come from all over the world to come and study in Scotland, and that they would come and their lives would be changed, and that would have a significant impact. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is, I had a phrase since I was, about 21 or something, that I want to be a person who speaks truth and life that will set people free. And so on a smaller scale, I guess the prayer of my life is that the people that I interact with on a day-to-day, and whether I know them for years or whether I meet them once, that there would be some freedom that they find through Jesus, but that I would have a part to play in that.
So good. From there, can you pray for us, anyone who's listening, anyone who's watching, for us as well? Can you pray, maybe lead from that place and just pray blessing over us, and we'll finish on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, Jesus, I thank you that you are a God who is with us. That you are with us in the highs, in the lows. You are with us in the struggle and in the days where everything goes right. And we want to rest in that. We want to live out of that space. And Jesus, I pray for anybody who's listening, for me and for Luke, and for whoever it is, that we would increasingly hear your voice, that we would hear the words that we need to hear, that those words would bring us freedom, they would bring us peace, they would bring us wholeness, and that out of that our lives would impact many in the big ways and the small ways. That your goodness would be known through the lives that we have. And we thank you for the blessing that is, for the privilege it is to be part of bringing your goodness and your hope to those around us. Yeah, and Jesus, I pray for all of us who need to hear that you are not disappointed in us. We thank you that you aren't disappointed in us, that you love us, and that you just see the gold in us. And I pray that there wouldn't be any fear of judgment or criticism or whatever that holds us back from a relationship with you. Yeah, in your name I pray.
Amen. Christa, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome. It's been a privilege.